I would like to start this interview because we were talking about the role of the states under our Constitution and why it's so important for our states to really stand up and be the spokesman for the people, and why the states were always intended to be the powerful, as far as government, the powerful sovereign of the United States. It was never the federal government. So I'd like you to kind of tell our viewers exactly what that process was intended to be and Madison's role and so forth.
Sure. So backing it out a little bit, the Articles of Confederation were failing. The states were literally going to go defunct. They were going in debt. Many of the states couldn't afford to pay off their debt. Massachusetts was one of the few, and Arizona was one of the few. So the impetus and the real motivation to save the Union was to literally change its form of government. And so when they created the Constitution, what they did was they created a limited government, and they defined it within what they call an instrument or a contract. And so when they actually sent that contract out to the states to buy into it, if you understand contract law, whenever I tell you that this is what this line means in a contract, that becomes legally binding. When you define any line within a contract, and that's what happened during the ratification debates. So most people have completely obscured the ratification debates in their legal context of the Constitution. The reason why was John Marshall actually happened to participate in the Virginia ratification debates. And I know I'm going down a rat hole, but this will all make sense. John Marshall knew, he heard exactly the hard limitations. So when he started making rulings as the Chief Justice during 9 landmark cases, and actually there's 7 that were really hallmark cases that usurped states' authorities, he knew he was lying in those rulings. The whole point of his rulings and opinions, they have no legal founding. In other words, the Supreme Court cannot legislate or write laws.
It stepped outside of its spec.
Absolutely, but his opinions were unfounded, and if you compared or contrasted them to what he said in the ratification debates as well as all the other Federalists, the Constitution is hard fast. The only way that the federal government can take on any new, I call them roles, responsibilities, and powers, is through the amendment process. So backing it out to the macro, again, the Constitution being a contract, the ratification debates being definitions of the contract and a legal binding appendage to the contract. The states really have the supreme authority over all things not delegated. That was continually said at the ratification debates. So that is one of the reasons why, and every single state unanimously demanded the 10th Amendment, that those things not delegated were reserved to the states and the people. And so the states have been sleeping at the wheel, allowing the federal government through opinions and unconstitutional things such as case law, precedents, and constitutional law. Just go on a rabbit hole real quick. If you have a phone, and whether it be Verizon, AT&T, a smartphone, or what have you, if you've got a contract with Verizon. Have you ever heard of Verizon law?
I can't say as I have.
There's no such thing.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as Verizon law, and contracts don't create law. It's either in the contract or it's not in the contract. And so the lawyers have self-aggrandized their position in trying to create law called constitutional law. Oh, well, because we've made these decisions and somebody said this, and emanations from penumbras, women can get abortions, and that's what Blackmun said. And so that's all unconstitutional. If women can get abortions, it's up to the state. The states have that full authority. So if you look at the premise of what I'm asserting, the states, inherent within their contract, they have the override or the oversight and privilege of auditing their contract. If you look at what Madison and Jefferson did in 1798 when the Sedition Acts came out, there were 4 accompanying acts with the Sedition Act, and they just called them the Sedition Acts. They actually audited. Jefferson, in his resolution, audited the Constitution, said you only have jurisdiction over 3 laws: treason, counterfeiting, and piracy of the high seas, and laws against nations, 4 laws. But those laws are 2 of those laws are outside the jurisdiction of the United States boundaries. But anyway, so this resolution actually created a footprint, or I should say a bread trail crumb, of what they were intending on doing. And their intent was to audit the Constitution, say you don't have any authority from us, and so this pulling the states together in a review process, because that's what they did. During the resolutions, they appealed to all the other states to join them. And if you read all of the writings from Madison and Jefferson afterwards, they were very sanguine, they were very morose, or they lamented the fact that other states did not join them in rebuking the federal government. And that was what their intent was, and that's what the states need to do. The states can actually pull together and pull back their congressmen when they get to a point where they have enough consensus, because it just requires 13 states.
Right.
13 states can say, you don't have the amount of states necessary to create the constitutional authority, because it takes 38 states to amend the Constitution. Right. And so the Constitutional Convention is literally just a process of amending the Constitution, but Republic Review is the process of enforcing it. That's really what it is. It's enforcing the contract to say, we never gave you these authorities, and this is the flow process of that. You'll notice that it points to the Article 5 process, because the states may come along and say, well, we think that the CDC might be a legitimate...
I'm going to interrupt.